Spacetime Utopia Number 1. Kill the fucking king. Intro, the prediction. A young boy named IV sat in a fortune teller's shop, deep in Ultraviolet City. His skin was of black bronze, and his eyes, sometimes olive green, and other times, brown like honey, more bitter than sweet. His kinky aquamarine green hair curled at the tips like an ominous cloud above his emotionless expression. But there was a storm coming, an anger which lingered so long that expressing it had already lost its purpose. He sat skin and bones before a woman named Nisi, who claimed to be a witch, that she died 4 times and learned her magic in the life after life. She wore a bright pink hood which crackled in cyan electricity. Under her shroud her eyes were so black they appeared embroidered in everything they reflected. Her white smile was just as bright, somehow. Yet the legends of her beauty never drew people to her home. In fact, most avoided her, yet expressed this fear through indifference. There is no room for magic in this neon-lit pit. Ultraviolet City was a planet-sized city, where phosphorescent lights in shades of blue, green, and pink shone in sync, and in any other color to distract oneself from looking up. Where the light pollution made it impossible to see the stars anyway, and the citizens had already quit thinking outside those boundaries. A myriad of troubles proliferated beneath the celestial vacuum, and the young boy felt trapped there, knowing there was more to try in the Triverse. Nisi placed her hand on a pink deck of cards.
What brings you here?
She asked, softly. He twiddled 2 fingers on the mahogany desk in the rhythm of his wonder.
I'm looking for...
I think I already know.
She cheesed.
You're special, strong. In you lives the blood of dragons, a leviathan.
He tilted his head.
What do you know about it?
I know what it is you seek.
Enlighten me.
The vibrant neon lights served as the backdrop, shining into the shop's 2 windows. Its dilapidated exterior belied the mysterious aura blanketing the space within. Time seemed to have forgotten the shack. Its crumbling walls and peeling paint stood enveloped in technicolor tints twinkling along the edges of the room, fluttering beneath candles. A worn, round table took center stage, straining under the weight of scattered artifacts. And an earthy scent of sage and dried apricot seeped into every nook. She placed her finger on his heart.
You've come for proof of something else and other. Experience. You know, no one can trick anyone, we all look like what we want. Some just choose to ignore it in you. This is why.
She pulled a card. The boy watched intently as majestic pink and blue hues whirled and fused on its surface, coming to life as it transformed into a pastel bouquet of color. The inky liquid flowed into a picture of a knight, a woman, holding a sword. A figure so vivid, the details so elaborate, it seemed the knight might step onto the table. Beneath the image, the characters XI were written in bold, striking script.
Justice.
Nisi said with a frown, eyes fixed on the card.
It is not a card one wishes to see regarding their past, my dear. It speaks of a sense of being wrong and a desire for retribution, that your actions, and perhaps your very being, are driven by the need for revenge.
The boy studied the card, however apprehensively. Nisi was right. He always felt a sense of injustice and a desire to right whatever wrong he witnessed. Wandering the void, he dreamed of bringing balance to the world. But now, as he looked at the card, he realized the passion may not be as pure as he thought. Motivated by darker impulses, maybe it was only a yearning to prove himself.
What can I do?
You must learn to distinguish true justice from revenge. Watch with clear eyes and an open heart. Let go of the past, move forward with purpose.
She placed her hand on her cards.
Although, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. At least you know your worth.
She pulled another card and placed it on the table. Again, the blue and pink ink churned and mashed into a portrait. The yellow and blue bubbled and grew until it featured a man hanging from a tree, swinging from side to side above the characters XII.
Oh, no. Hangman.
Nisi said, struggling not to grimace.
This speaks of being trapped or feeling powerless. It suggests that something, or someone, is holding you back from reaching your full potential.
She tried to smile, but only managed a smirk.
Don't fret, my dear.
Nisi reassured him.
It's important to remember, I'm using 2 cards to read your presence. These cards must be taken in combination with one another. While the hangman may seem dire, we must also consider the second card before coming to any conclusions.
She placed another card on the table, but it, too, became another hangman.
Oh.
Now she grimaced.
Did you shuffle those?
The boy asked with a grin. Nisi freed a hearty laugh.
Silly boy, real magicians have no need to shuffle.
She placed her fingernail on the table, the polish painted in the fire of stars, and the caricatures jumped from their cards and began moving of their own accord.
This is not a good sign, my dear. It seems you're caught in a cycle, a loop of your own making. Held back by the very people you're trying to help, and in turn, you are holding yourself back from truly being able to help them. And therefore, holding them back as well.
The boy sat in silence, mind racing. She paused with a stern expression.
I must be honest, it doesn't look like things will be going well for you.
The boy felt a pang of worry in his chest. He knew these words were true, he was holding himself back, imprisoned by his ambiguities.
I'll find a way through. For sure. Go on, this is interesting.
She pulled the last card.
To the future.
And she placed it down. The ink slithered and swirled like a mysterious pool until its edges formed the image of the very same boy sitting in front of him. And he stared at the card, back at himself, both their expressions unreadable. Nisi's eyes grew bright as she inspected the card, and the boy. The ink finally settled, and she read the characters IV etched in the corner.
Emperor.
She whispered, in all her awe.
My initial perception of you was flawed. Your desires run deeper than mortality. More than experience.
What does that mean?
It means that the Triverse is yours for the taking. You will have everything you desire. You want more than this life, don't you? A deeper purpose, a higher goal.
The boy fell silent, his gaze piercing the darkness of Nisi's hood. He was the only person to see her face in a long time.
Go forth, young one.
She pointed into the sky.
Kill the fucking king.
Spacetime Utopia number 1. Kill the fucking king. In the beginning, there was the Triverse, a cosmos divided not by space but by perspective. The first earthly perspective was called Opulus. Half covered in snow, the white sky, scattered and pierced by the tops of high-rising castles befitting the royal families that inhabited them. A place of fashion, science, technology, protected by the heavy hand of the Vortex family, who ruled the Triverse. The Vortex prohibited portal travel to other perspectives. The second earthly perspective was called Betwixt, a beautiful space of wonder, most known for its sparkling water, wonderful weather, and floating islands. Its citizens weren't seen as a threat to the Vortex family, as they normally just dabbled in trade, philosophy and relaxation. They were well behaved and, as such, well off. This brings us to the third earthly perspective, aptly named the Void, where our story begins. Known for its enormous cities, it was home to the rough people they called the Avoided. IV was born here, more specifically, in Ultraviolet City, its biggest and most dangerous metropolis. Inside it stood a magnificent tower, its most notable monument, a beacon of prosperity amid the hazy borough. Its golden stone walls glinted in the artificial light, in contrast to the dull concrete and steel of the surrounding buildings. At the top of the tower sat King Vortex, the gatekeeper of a portal of perspective he expected the Avoided never reach. He was the reason the Avoided were trapped there, the reason their dreams of freedom were impossible. The boy now goes by the name of 4. He was older now, 14, and Nisi's prophecy still echoed in his dreams, like the memories were too loud. But the mere existence of her magic taught him anything was possible. Even his mission. IV was bigger, and for his stature he built a considerable amount of muscle. Born and raised, Avoided, he differed from the others. He was faster, stronger, and could even speak to animals, although all that ever followed was a murder of crows. He didn't care why or waste time with confusion, however, he cared a great deal about his appearance. Like many in Ultraviolet City, his fashion was unique, the only boy to wear a cape around his hoodie. both green and purple and green. Over his jeans he wore shiny steel knight's greaves, and over his hands were gauntlets of the same glittery metal, and detailed golden impressions decorated each. IV had a dangerous task he planned to accomplish, with style. He schemed to overthrow King Vortex and open the portal to Opulus and betwixt, anywhere but here. IV sat outside his home, staring up into the black sky, circled and surrounded by crows.
The king is said to possess an extreme amount of power.
Caught the murder.
You sure you can defeat him? You'll end up as the others, imprisoned and tortured.
Imprisoned? If he doesn't kill me, he won't win.
IV replied, straightforwardly.
He'll kill you then. It'd be a shame if you died. But if you did though, what with all your belongings?
IV tossed the key to his home with a smirk.
Lease is up in 4 months.
He said nonchalantly, hiding his excitement.
It's cool, cause I'll be living in that tower.
The rest of his belongings, he crammed into a large black sack. His life was filled with so many things that had to be packed away, such as his empathy, intimacy, and compassion. And these important characteristics, which made up who he was, chaotically shuffled around his bag.
Won't it all just get in the way?
Isn't it heavy?
IV wiped his forehead.
Yes.
And with that, he embarked on his quest, determined to overthrow the tyrant who terrorized his kingdom for far too long. Pushing forward, despite the danger ahead. Traveled for days up the perilous structure. He climbed an eternal spiral of stairs, making quick work of any guard who had the displeasure of meeting him. There weren't many. It had been a long time since anyone challenged King Vortex, who probably didn't need the help, anyway. For example, IV stood faced off against 4 guards armed with spears and an axe. 2 challenged him from above, while the other 2 flanked from behind. He clutched his heavy bag in one hand, brought up his other fist, and shook it like a rattlesnake would, as if to warn its venomous strike. Yet the guard stepped forward. IV kicked the first guard out the nearby window with finesse. His body tumbled through the air and disappeared from view. The other guards hesitated, but only for a moment. One kept his distance, circling the tip of his spear from the high ground, periodically striking from safety. But IV evaded, and smashed him with his heavy bag, sending the poor soldier crashing through several flights of staircases. IV jumped over the hole. The third man, startled, charged at him, axe raised. But IV punched him with incredible force, sending him falling up the stairs. He hit the wall and crumpled to the ground, unconscious, then rolled down into the hole. The last guard jumped, spear overhead, but IV was too quick. He spun around, dodging the guard's weapon, and grabbed him by the neck before his feet touched the ground. And with a powerful squeeze, crushed his windpipe, leaving him gasping for air. Then, IV tossed him in the hole too. Never had he met a challenge he couldn't overcome, but after what felt like an eternity of spiraling through the storm, fatigue set in. His bag became heavier with each step, and it slowed him down. Eventually, he was forced to toss some of its contents. Intimacy went first. He promised to one day reclaim it. He knew this struggle couldn't last forever. Soon enough, his strength would return, and the chaos would clear, and everything would be alright once more.
Yeah, I'll come back.
However, it didn't take long for him to become exhausted, and just before he reached the giant golden doors of the throne room. He tried rested for a moment, yet of course the murder wouldn't let him.
So, you're really going to fight King Vortex? Tired? With such a heavy bag?
The crows screeched. IV didn't speak.
Only a fool would fight King Vortex with as many hindrances.
Shut up.
The spiral corridor filled with their laughter.
But IV, why keep your compassion when you're going to face such a ruthless opponent? It's irresponsible. You should at least get rid of that.
IV looked down.
It's rare that y'all ever make sense, but...
He tossed his compassion out of the closest window. With the weight off, he prepared himself for battle, unclear whether he'd emerge victorious or become another victim of the king's tyrannical force. Only time could tell what fate awaited him as he stepped into battle against an enemy more formidable than any he faced before. IV opened the doors to a room with no ceiling, just an open sky filled with lightning, surrounded by thick golden walls glistening in the storm. King Vortex sat on his throne, bedazzled with every jewel and gem the earth's core could cook. His crown was densely gilded in rubies, emeralds, and sapphires, each shimmering in the light like star dew. King Vortex adjusted himself slightly so that he wouldn't be uncomfortable from the heavy weight of his crown. Then he opened his eyes, and a menacing smile spread across his face before he erupted into rumbling laughter, echoing through the chamber amongst the booming bursts of thunder. The sound startled the massive blue griffin sleeping at his side, who quickly woke with a jolt before settling down again beside its king.
What's funny?
Ivy glared.
Oh, it's... Whenever you kids challenge me, it's just... Oh, the frivolity of it all. None of you know what you want.
The king rose 10 or 11 feet high, like he could pluck Ivy from the ground between his two thick fingers.
Take the throne. I'll just leave. Fuck all of this.
No, you'll die for all you've done, and all you could have done but haven't.
See? You don't know. What do you think would happen if you took my place?
He stepped forward.
Well, at least, unlike the others, you seem competent. Like you could actually...
Blood sprayed from the king's neck. He hadn't even noticed Ivy move.
Ow.
King Vortex plugged the hole in his neck with the tip of his index, cackling.
You're a fast little boy.
Ivy pointed up at the king.
No, you're slow.
Speed doesn't matter, child.
King Vortex howled, his eyes were bright with ecstasy. He swung his axe with such spirit, the cloud spiraled from space into its force. For was fast, but the vortex formed from the blast threw him about its turbulent gusts. He spun at such speed he felt the extreme pressure above his nose and almost fainted. He had no choice but to reach into his bag and empty the last of its contents. And his empathy was taken by the wind. For jumped through the air, launching, and leaping from large pieces of airborne debris. Blood leaked from his nose wildly as it snapped against the G-force. He pulled back, then threw a punch so heavy it broke every bone in his knuckle before impact, directly into the king's chin. His head shook, his eyes rolled white, and he fell to his knees bleeding profusely from his neck. He coughed, laughed, then gagged when the blood stripped too much space for maniacal cries of glee, until he fainted and collapsed to his knees. Then, he suddenly regained consciousness, on his knees still taller than Ivy. He tried to speak but only produced chokes and spurts of blood, until, with a grin, he plugged the hole again with his finger.
I wish
He coughed.
I could watch you.
He fainted again, and his hand dropped, and blood streamed from his neck shamelessly. Yet once more, his lifeless pupils seemed to crawl toward the bleeding, and he woke again behind that stare. He coughed, then plugged the hole.
Wish I could watch you fuck this up.
He finished. And finally, he died.